Our leaders have wreaked plenty of havoc in the name of our democracy. To sort through the carnage, presidents will be ranked on a tier list. The more innocent people a president kills, the higher his ranking. Let's see if you agree with my list. Now on with the fanfare. But what exactly is a war crime? It may seem simple. A war crime is a violation of the international law of war, but there are several different laws of war on the books. Today, we'll be using the Geneva Conventions. These 4 treaties are the gold standard for the oxymoron, humane warfare. It's been ratified by 196 countries, including the United States of America. No commander-in-chief would ever dare break our word, right? During World War II, the Allies did a service to the world by defeating the evil empires of Germany and Japan. However, America committed atrocities of her own that we need to discuss. Halfway through the war, the Allies began deliberately attacking civilian targets. Why? They had realized the effectiveness of the nationalist propaganda of the Third Reich and Imperial Japan. Since the war had yet to plainly affect either populace, it was easy to convince them that the war was totally worth fighting. That is, until 1943, when the German city of Hamburg was bombed to ashes. Aside from shattering the illusion of serenity in warfare, the attack also overwhelmed German emergency services and clogged transportation routes with throngs of refugees. Later, in 1945, the Allies infamously annihilated the city of Dresden via several bombing raids. In the ensuing firestorms, men, women, and children were burned alive. The fortunate fainted due to asphyxiation first, and then were burned alive. Combined, these 2 aerial attacks resulted in at least 60,000 civilian deaths. But Tommy, I hear you typing, what about the London Blitz? The Germans literally did the exact same thing to the Brits in 1940. They started it. And you'd be right. In September 1940, the Germans commenced a sustained 8-month bombing campaign on London and other strategic British cities. Their intention was to destroy the morale of the British public, who would then pressure their government to sue for peace. This didn't happen, even though over 40,000 British civilians were killed in these attacks. So, weren't the later Allied reprisals deserved? Maybe they were. I'm not here to judge whether these attacks were morally or even militarily justified, but strictly if they violated the Geneva Conventions or not. We'll get to that shortly. America's best work was saved for the country that bombed Pearl Harbor. In late 1944, after a grueling island-hopping campaign, American forces were finally able to attack the Japanese capital of Tokyo. Sadly, initial precision bombing raids on large factories yielded disappointing results. New tactics were needed. As there was a great deal of decentralized manufacturing in small shops and homes, the city's residential areas themselves became targets. On March 10, 1945, American forces under General Curtis LeMay firebombed Tokyo. In this era, most of Tokyo's buildings were constructed of wood or bamboo. For a metropolis of its size, its firefighting ability was virtually non-existent. The city was ripe for a napalm attack. Dry conditions and 65-mile-per-hour winds further made the city a tinderbox. Literal tornadoes of fire swept down streets, cooking the air in some places to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. To attempt to escape the heat, some jumped into the Sumida River. They were promptly boiled to death. In the end, half of the city had been reduced to ashes. The death toll was around 100,000 civilians, the deadliest conventional air raid in human history. FDR sure knew how to put in a full day's work. He's responsible for the deaths of 160,000 non-combatants. According to the Geneva Conventions, Protocol 1, Article 51, of deliberately targeting civilians is a war crime. Quote, "The civilian population, as well as individual civilians, shall not be the object of attack." We now know enough to rank Franklin Roosevelt on our tier list. For violating Geneva Conventions Protocol 1, I'm placing...
To condemn Roosevelt, you referenced Protocol 1 of the Geneva Conventions, one of 3 addendums to the original treaties. However, Protocol 1 wasn't signed until 1977. How can a law be broken if it didn't even exist yet?
True, FDR wouldn't have considered his actions war crimes at the time. but that doesn't mean we can't apply a modern lens to history. After World War II, at the Nuremberg trials, defendants were charged with genocide. That wasn't codified into international law until 1946. The crime didn't even have a name before the war. Does this mean the Holocaust shouldn't be considered a war crime in retrospect?
22 countries still haven't ratified Geneva Conventions Protocol 1 in 2023, including the United States of America. Therefore, it doesn't apply to them.
174 countries have ratified Protocol 1. Therefore, in the eyes of 90% of the world's governments, intentionally killing civilians is a war crime. It's no bueno.
I've heard enough. Objection overruled. You may proceed.
Thanks, Your Honor. For violating Geneva Conventions Protocol 1, I'm putting FDR in orange tier. Next up, President Truman.